1. An entire factory crew happily worked with radium in their 20s, and most of them died horrifically of radiation poisoning not very long after. When radium was first discovered, people didn't realize how dangerous it was for a tragically long time. Its impressive glow-in-the-dark properties made it popular for use in paints, and many female factory workers were hired by the United States Radium Corporation to use it to paint watch dials, a coveted and well-paid job for women at the time. They were obviously unaware of the lethal properties of radium, and part of their job was to sharpen the point of their paintbrush with their teeth, ingesting the poisonous paint as they went. They would even sometimes mess around and paint their skin, teeth, and nails for fun. Years later, most of the workers suffered terrible radiation-related ailments like decaying teeth, crumbling bones, and spines that crushed under their own weight. 2. In the 18th century, a woman actually convinced doctors that she was giving birth to rabbits. Mary Toft reportedly gave birth to up to 9 of the fluffy creatures at a time, or doctors were convinced that she was telling the truth until they found pieces of corn inside the stomach of one of the rabbits, proving that it hadn't developed inside Toft's womb. It turned out that she had been manually inserting the rabbits to make the deliveries look as realistic as possible. 3. Until very recently, it was believed that babies couldn't feel pain, so often had operations done on them without any anesthesia. Doctors would instead use muscle relaxers that had a paralytic effect to stop the baby from moving. This meant that while they couldn't move or cry while they were being operated on, they could still see, hear, and feel everything that was done to them. The belief that infants under the age of 15 months couldn't feel pain was largely accepted until the late 1980s. 4. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan killed so many people that the carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were significantly reduced as a result. During his 21-year reign, Genghis Khan's destructive armies were responsible for the deaths of up to 40 million people, while his intentions for the massacres were anything but pure. With nobody left to farm the lands owned by the peasants, they were eventually allowed to grow back into carbon-absorbing forests. It's estimated that 700 tons of carbon were wiped from the atmosphere, around the same amount of carbon dioxide generated in a year through global petrol consumption. 5. In 1930s London, parents used to hang their babies in cages outside their windows. To be fair to the parents of the time, with most people in London living in cramped apartments, a regular supply of fresh air, which was considered vital for a baby's development, was hard to come by. The contraptions were designed so that babies could still benefit from fresh air and sunshine despite not having a garden to safely play outside in. 6. In 1518, the city of Strasbourg was hit by a dancing plague, where people would dance uncontrollably for days at a time. It began with a single woman dancing solo for a few days, before eventually more and more people became affected. Doctors proclaimed that the illness was caused by overheated blood, and recommended that the inflicted should continue to shimmy and sway the fever away. Musicians were even called in, and a stage was set up in the town center to give the dancers more room. While the idea may seem funny at first, most of them kept dancing till they fell unconscious, and some died from exhaustion, heart attack, or stroke. 7. A 7th century woman gave birth after she had already died, and her case isn't unique. Archaeologists discovered the mother's remains laying face up, suggesting a deliberate burial, with the skeleton of a fetus in between her legs, and only the legs of the baby still inside her. There have been very few other instances of this happening throughout history. It's called coffin birth, and can happen when the pregnant corpse releases gases while decomposing that pushes the stillborn fetus out. 8. Being buried alive was way more common than you might have thought in the 18th century. At the time, the mortality rate was so high that doctors weren't always present to make sure the patient was actually dead, so witnesses would often take the apparent lack of breathing or a pulse as enough of a confirmation. The problem got so bad that people started taking additional measures to make sure the corpse was dead before burying them, including shouting in their ear, sticking needles under their toenails, and whipping them with nettles. In Germany, they went a step further and set up hospitals for the dead to observe the rotting process before the bodies were buried. Some of these were around till the 1950s. 9. A single tiger killed an estimated 436 people in Nepal and the Kuaman area of India at the turn of the 20th century. Although rare for tigers to attack humans, let alone eat them, it's believed that over time the The Champawat tiger became dependent on human meat to survive, whereas her natural habitat of grasslands and forest were destroyed to make room for timber and farmland, and smaller animals migrated or otherwise became scarce due to poaching. There seemed no choice but to attack nearby villages for sustenance. A reign of terror lasted almost a decade, till she was eventually killed in 1907. 10. In the 19th century, a woman was hanged for killing the children that she promised to look after. Minnie Dean took in unwanted babies in an effort to make money, and many of them became sick and died or mysteriously disappeared. Investigators eventually concluded that she had been killing the children in her care. It was even suggested she'd been disposing of their remains in shoeboxes. She was the only woman to ever be given the death sentence in New Zealand.